I spoke to 3 open source founders to figure out how to have a successful project and answer the questions that you want to know most. Really quick, let's talk about why open source is such a big deal in the world of programming. This industry would in fact not exist without open source. If you're writing JavaScript code on Linux using React, you are using 10 libraries, each of which also depends on 10 libraries. Well, in that case, you are using millions of lines of code that other people wrote for free. You publish your code somewhere like GitHub, not just because you want to be a nice person, because other people can contribute too. On GitHub, you have stars, which is likes or the popularity of the project. You can see a full history of every commit or time when the code was updated, and you can see everyone who's added to it over time, which can be hundreds of people. If you check the Issues tab, there's a list of bugs and questions. This is a really good place to get started as a contributor. You can pick an issue and fix it. Whether you're updating the docs, adding a feature, or fixing a bug, you download the code, make changes on your local machine, and then submit the changes as a pull request. The pull request is reviewed by the maintainer or team of maintainers, and if you wrote quality code that makes sense to be in the project, you will be accepted and your code will be merged for everyone to use. Once that happens, you've officially become an open source contributor for that project. But why should you do it? Well, there's at least 4 good reasons. GitHub is your portfolio as a developer that companies will often look at. Connections. Many people involved in open source are doing it part-time. They have jobs at companies you might want to work at or are very legit people in the software industry. Monetization, which we'll hear about in a minute from the founders themselves. And a lot of people just enjoy doing it. Writing code that potentially millions of people will benefit from. Okay, you clicked on this video, so how exactly do you succeed? And that's why I interviewed these 3 maintainers. First, we have Nicholas, founder of ESLint, Caleb, founder of Alpine.js, and Puya, founder of Daisy UI. The rest of this video is going to be the best clips from the long conversations I had with each one of them. So let's dive in. Actually, you want to just introduce yourself, like who are you? What's your main project? Where are you based? A little, maybe one intro.
Yeah, Caleb Porzio, Livewire and Alpine are my projects. Alpine's a little JavaScript framework, kind of like the modern jQuery is how I view it for myself. And Livewire is, HTMX is popular now, so people actually know what HTMX is, but it's kind of like in that realm of tool for the Laravel PHP framework. So a lot of these ecosystems have this sort of full stack framework now, and Livewire is the Laravel one. So yeah, those are the 2 open source projects. I live in Buffalo, New York. Yeah, and I hang out here, work from home, programming, open source, full time. So that's me.
I'm Nicholas Dakis, and my main project right now is maintaining ESLint. So ESLint is a code quality tool for JavaScript, as well as TypeScript, JSX, basically anything that JavaScript developers would write that become JavaScript when it's shipped. ESLint can help you write that better to bind problems, enforce best practices, and things like that. I've been working on ESLint for 10 years, and at the moment we have almost 35 million weekly downloads on NPM. Not working on it full time, maybe 1 to 2 hours each weekday, depending on the week. We, in fact, don't have anybody who's working on ESLint full-time at the moment. Everybody's working in their spare time, nights and weekends, or whenever they can duck in.
My name is Puya, and I'm the developer of Daisy UI, which is a UI component library for Tailwind CSS. So I started building on top of Tailwind for my different projects. And at that time, I was basically copy-pasting my own styles from one project to another project. I thought maybe I can make an easier way. A lot of people, they just want a button. Like, they don't care about specific details. They just want a button that looks good. This is where I think Daisy UI shines, because it helps you to quickly style all your elements. And then after that, you have the options to customize it with any Tailwind CSS utility class.
Can you tell us a little bit about your career leading up to this project? What's your background as a developer prior to that?
Yeah, I don't have a CS degree. Self-taught, like TI-83 in middle school, like making little programs. That's when I got the itch. And then I got into web, like PHP. And then I went to college for electrical engineering because I really like tinkering with that stuff too. Totally. I dropped out of school completely after like a year and a half. Build sites for friends and family, stuff like that. And then eventually got like an actual programming job with PHP and CodeIgniter. It was like 60 grand salary. And then after that, once you get like your first real job, then you just get more jobs and then you're set. You don't need the degree. So the Tailwind creator, Adam, he worked at Titan. And I was like, I want to work at Titan. This is Mount Olympus. Like, I want to work at this agency. So I started producing open source stuff just for the interview, like so that I could show something. So I made this package called Onboard. No one ever used it. It's probably got like 50 stars, but it helped me get the job at Titan, which I didn't get the first time, but got the second time. By the time I had launched Livewire and Alpine, I already had a following on Twitter and I already had an email list and a blog and whatever. Blog posts were everything I was learning, like for those listening, if you're beginning, you're in the perfect place to write a blog post about that thing. Like you think you're not because you're not an expert, but you're actually the best person to teach it because you're the closest person to that, that perspective, that learner's perspective. You need to be confident and you need to, because people are going to say like, oh, well, did you know? They're going to say that because you're a noob and you're going to post stuff, but you got to just do it and deal with the people saying, did you know that blah, blah, blah. And then you go, oh, now I do. And then next time you'll be better. So yeah, you build up your audience by providing people value. Oh, this technique, actually this tweet, this could be a blog post. Like I'm going to write a full blog post about this. Okay. Write a blog post, publish that. Oh, people really like that blog post. It's my most popular blog post. That blog post could probably be an open source package. I'm going to make it a package, make it an open source package, publish that, and then tweet about that, blog about that. And then you go, oh, people are really into this thing. I should get them on an email list so that I can tell them about updates. And you do that. And then you're like, well, I have so many people using this project. They want to know how to use it. They keep asking me, how would you build a blog with this? So do some screencasts. Well, I can charge for some of those too. And I already have an email list and a blog and a Twitter following. And then you can launch that to people, charge some small amount for your screencasts. And now all of a sudden you're doing open source work sustainably. Like that really is the formula that is my whole journey for the past 5 years. It's just that.
Yeah. So I actually got started writing JavaScript in 1996 when I went to college. That's what I was hacking on all the time. When I came out of college in 2000, immediately went into web development. And at that time, we were at IE4 and Netscape 4. And I found the language JavaScript just really, really interesting. So I went out, I bought every book that was published at the time, which was actually not that many. And as I continued learning, I kind of discovered that the books ended right where things were getting interesting for me. And so as a result of that, and my continuing to explore JavaScript, I wrote my first book, which was published in 2005, called Professional JavaScript for Web Developers, and had a lot of fun writing that as I was continuing to do web development. A little after that, this thing called Ajax became really popular, and I ended up writing a follow-up book called Professional Ajax. That was one of the first books on that topic that was out. As a result of that, I ended up getting a job at Yahoo, which at the time still had like the second or third most visited website in the world, and worked on my Yahoo page, the Yahoo homepage, went off, did some consulting, continued kind of tinkering around with open source, ended up working at a company called Box. And it was while I was at Box that I came up with the idea for ESLint. And so that was the first place that actually put it into production use. I open sourced it afterwards. And since then, I've continued writing JavaScript books. I've worked as a consultant. I work as a coach for software engineers, and of course, continue to maintain ESLint.
And before Daisy UI, I was doing freelance works, either with companies or individuals. And I also had experience with small startups and like medium-sized startups, but not big companies. And then after a while, I started working on open source.
What would you say are some of the best and then the worst parts of doing it?
The best part about open source is people giving of their time to make a tool better for everybody. And then you meet those people and you become friends with them. And that's been a beautiful thing. So that's the bright side of open source for me. Like the dark side of open source is, where do I start? No, there's like a lot of entitlement. You see it in any repo you ever go to in the issues and whatever. There's just like, not everybody, but there's a handful of people who, if something's broken, it's your problem. problem. It's not theirs. Even though they get the software for free, it's your problem. And they'll get like angry and borderline abusive. And so, we end up like blocking people, closing issues, stuff like that when people go over the line. But honestly, there's not a ton of that, but you develop a thick skin for that pretty quickly. It's like a hard part of my journey has been competition. I've like made tools in the past and then people go, oh, that's a really good idea. I'm going to take that and tweak it a little bit and then launch my own thing. And that is okay because we all like have an MIT license on the software. So that's something that I've had to deal with is people like take your idea and then they create like a lightweight alternative to your idea and they steal all your innovations that you work really hard on and then try to kind of, or like a wrapper, like a lightweight wrapper for this. And then the people who use that wrapper don't even know what's underneath. So you don't get any of the visibility. I like care a lot about the thing I create. And so when somebody does that, I view it like negatively. So
the best part of open source is when you realize other people actually care about what you're working on and want to spend their time helping. So very early on, I was really lucky to attract a small core team that just loved working on ESLint, like long before it was the linter of choice for JavaScript. They were just putting in monumental amount of hours, just writing rules, debugging, like comparing against JS hint. And every morning I would wake up and there would be 10 pull requests that were solving problems that I knew ESLint had. And all I had to do was go in and review them and merge them. People are coming in, filing issues, opening pull requests, having interesting ideas. And they're not always good ideas, but it's fun to hear them and to really stop and think like, yeah, why is ESLint doing it like that? One thing that's challenging is there is this perception that open source maintainers are being paid full-time salaries and they're around just to help you out. And with a lot of the frameworks, especially being supported by companies now, it's hard for people to understand that, hey, me and the other people on the team, we're working in our spare time, maybe an hour or two each weekday, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. There are all kinds of things that we're dealing with. I've been more than one time called the thing that's wrong with open source because of the way I handled or didn't handle something to someone's liking. When I did a discussion on GitHub talking about the planned rewrite of ESLint, one of the things I said that I didn't think was controversial at the time was we were not going to be rewriting ESLint into TypeScript. And I got attacked for days. Why aren't you doing TypeScript? That's ridiculous. You're not going to get contributors if you don't write TypeScript. You obviously don't know what your users want. You should be listening more to what people are saying. Everybody on this thread wants you to use TypeScript. And it went on for days. No matter how politely I tried to explain to people, like, look, this doesn't actually affect whether you're writing TypeScript. This is just for the maintainers of ESLint, what we're deciding to do. And I wish people had better things to do with their lives than spend time harassing us about this decision.
In my experience, one of them was getting contributions from people. Even though it's a small contribution, it helps a lot. Like, for example, when I was doing translation of the website for different languages, which I don't know those languages, but a lot of people were willing to help with the translation or even adding new features or fixing bugs. And for me personally, it was I had the chance to find good people, amazing people in the community, specifically in GitHub and Twitter. And it also helped me with my skill sets because when you're developing an open source project, you have to write clean code. You have to do the structure. You can't just make a spaghetti code and put it on the GitHub because that's embarrassing. So it indirectly helps you to be a better developer, I think. Negative parts are not like specifically for open source projects, but like when the project gets bigger, people get expectations, people think about it and come up with new ideas, and then they expect you to put those ideas and do what they want. But the thing is, you have to say no to a lot of people. Like sometimes people want features from you that is in a completely irrelevant direction. It's hard to say no, but as a maintainer of the project, you have to be careful what do and what not to do for the project. And then sometimes people even put effort and spend time to make pull requests for your projects, and then you open it and you see, okay, this is not what I want for my project. So you have to close the PR, which is not good. It's no one likes that, but these are the things you have to do. Sometimes people just copy parts of your code, or like for my project design, they copy things and they think it's fine. But I mean, it would be fine if they give a credit, like I got this design from this project, but they don't. But I think it's a good sign, because when you see people are copying from you, it means you're doing good.
Was there a specific thing that you did, like one event that, let's say, gave you a huge bump in users, or anything specific you can think of?
Yeah, two things. So for Livewire, it's a Laravel package. So Laravel is a PHP framework. Laracon is a conference that happens every year, and I've attended it forever. And so I got to speak at it, and my talk was on things similar to Livewire before Livewire existed. But then I released Livewire like on stage at that conference. So like hit the make repo public button. And then when I tagged version 1.0, I did it at that conference. And then 2.0, I did it at that conference. And then 3.0, I just did at that conference. So like I try to hold up releases until I can like do my own like mini Steve Jobs keynote kind of thing. Because it just makes it feel so much more exciting. And that was huge. So I can actually look at like Composer installs, and you could just look at when those conferences happen, because it's like boom, boom, you know, or like analytics on the doc site. You can just see those. There's projects that just kind of die the slow death just because they don't have new things to announce. Not even so much that the tool has new things to offer. It's like things have to feel, that balloon has to be kept up. And that's a lesson I've learned over and over, is like, you have to be making your tool seem like the freshest, hottest thing. One non-conference event that changed things was Tailwind, using Alpine and Tailwind UI. So I was like the creator of Tailwind, Adam, and kind of like pitching him this thing, showing him this project I'm working on. And he's like, I could use this in Tailwind UI. This is like kind of Tailwind for JavaScript. And so he like pushed the project forward a bunch. He's like, oh, I need like this transition. I need this thing. And I would add these features. And then he included it in Tailwind UI, and there was some wording around like whatever. They ended up going like doubling down on React 100%. But it was going to be kind of like React, Vue, and Alpine, and just having that visibility. And that was huge, obviously, like because Tailwind is huge. And so Alpine got a lot of that juice just by, I guess, getting lucky and being close with Adam, and that, yeah.
So I think the most important thing that people skip over when they're trying to grow their open source project is making sure they have a good idea of what problem they are trying to solve, and also what problem they are not trying to solve. In the case of ESLint, the problem was we want a linter where we can actually create our own rules, and we don't have to be hamstrung by the built-in rules. And I even told people, like, if that is not your use case, then you should just use JS Hint, because that's going to get you up and running with all the basic stuff that you need right out of the box. It was actually the React folks who reached out and said, hey, we noticed that unlike JS Hint, the parser is not built into the middle of ESLint. So if you could allow us to plug in our own parser, we could use ESLint to lint our files with JSX in it, because JS Hint was not going to implement JSX support. And the React folks were kind of stuck at that point. And so took a look at it. It was fairly easy to allow them to plug in their own parser. And we went on from there. To this day, I have never done a talk on ESLint. I wrote a couple of blog posts, but that was pretty much it. But what I did do was, when I saw that people were doing their own talks or writing their own posts about ESLint, I made sure to amplify those. So I started the Get ESLint Twitter account. And early on, all that was doing, besides announcing new releases, was just retweeting people when they were saying that they were talking about ESLint, doing a talk on ESLint, doing a presentation on ESLint, like anything ESLint related, I wanted to promote and to amplify, to let people know that this really is going to be a community project. And I would say a third thing is invest in documentation. This is one of the biggest problems I see in a lot of open source projects when they start out, is they come out, maybe they do a big talk at some conference, proudly announcing their project, and you go to check it out, and there's very little documentation. There's no API documentation. There's no getting started documentation. Maybe there's not even a place in the repo for documentation. I can't tell you how many people have contacted me and said, hey, I'd like you to take a look at my open source project and just give me some feedback, what you think. And I look at it like, well, I don't know what your project does. Like, it doesn't actually say what it does. It doesn't tell me how to use it. So I just don't know where to go from there. And probably spent about 50% of my time in those early days just writing and editing documentation to make sure that people could get up and running on their own. Because if people think your project is interesting, they can't figure out how to use it, and you're not going to sit there and hold everybody's hand to help them get set up. It's just not going to get much of a following. And if you look at the NPM download trends, what you'll see is that the first 3 years, like, ESLint did not have a very large user base. It was at the 3-year point where it started to cross over JS hints downloads. And again, I think that was partly because of React and the React folks needing a linter that could lint JSX code. And JS hint couldn't do that. ESLint could. It might take time. Like, not everything just comes out of the gate and is really popular. Like, React tried to make incremental progress in getting the word out there and helping people to understand what your project does. And if enough people have the same problem that your project is solving, it will eventually grow.
I think for my projects and also other projects, it's important to find what is the issue, like what is the issue you can fix, what is the problem, like in this case, developers have, and you can improve that. You can help people in a way. So for example, for my project, I think I could help the developer experience of using Tailwind CSS, because I'm a fan of Tailwind CSS, but I've seen a lot of people were complaining about all the big HTML files, a lot of class names, and also people who are not experienced designers, they cannot do good design decisions. So they really need some help here. I think Daisy UI could fix this issue for the developers and improve their experience with Tailwind CSS.
Yeah. So, okay. Don't want to miss this question.
Yeah.
Anything you're willing to share on the monetizing side? You're
Yeah.
doing this full time. As many details as you're willing to give. People love to hear about the money.
I'll give you like what worked and what I do, and then I'll just give you like a few things that didn't work as well that I think are a mistake for probably a lot of people. My whole monetization strategy is kind of around content. But what I've learned is like, you don't need to have a big Twitter following to launch stuff too. You need to have, I'm going to use like a vague term, distribution is everything. You have to have distribution. The good news is if you have a documentation site, you have all the distribution you need. Like, there's your distribution channel. The other people, like indie hackers that are creating startups from scratch, their distribution might have to be ads. It might be their personal following, things like that. If you're an open source developer, you have a gold mine. Your distribution channel is your documentation site, and you can take that a bunch of different directions. And the thing that worked for me was screencasts. Give a bunch away for free and then charge for a bunch. So at the time when I started it, I was like, you get a pile of them for free, and then all the deeper stuff, like let's build an app. And I'd build an app with this tool and give away the source code and everything and charge $14 a month for like everything past the first like 15 videos or something. It's $14 a month. And that got me up to like, I was making like 250 grand a year just from that on GitHub sponsors. And that has been the best thing. That has tapered down because I've sort of abandoned that. There's a content treadmill you have to keep up on, and I just completely stopped. So everybody's going to bounce. Like, they're going to cancel their sponsorships. That's how it works. So I'm actually right now, just today, I launched the next version of the screencast, the free ones, and I'm working on more paid ones. And that, for me, that's my bedrock of sustainable living. And then there's other side things. So with Alpine, I did Alpine components. So if you're on the Alpine docs and whatever, on the sidebar, there's like this UI spot that's like modals, dropdowns, accordions, combo boxes, all that stuff. You click on those and it's a paid product. So you pay, and I have screencasts teaching you how to build all those, and also just the source code and a bunch of open source code for all that stuff. So it's like, I needed one today. I was like, oh, I need a modal in this project. Go to Alpine Components, copy, paste, done. Like, sweat all the details for you. You don't have to worry about accessibility and stuff like that. So that was a product I launched a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And that gives me good revenue at launch. I think it made like maybe around 100K at launch. that you have to have an email list. That's where people, I guess that you could do it all with documentation, but build email lists. That's how you make money. Email lists.
So 6 years after the project started, that we first started getting sponsorships. And those mostly come from companies, some individuals, and you can see all of that information on our website, actually. If you go to eslint.org/donate. And so the first two sponsors were Facebook, now Meta, and Airbnb, who both had reached out and said, hey, we're using this project. It's great. We'd really like to sponsor it. We have 163 companies, organizations, and individuals who are donating to us each month. Anybody who does any non-trivial work for ESLint, whether they are on the team or not, team members are invoicing on an hourly basis. And then outside contributors, we actually review all outside contributions every month, and we pay people based on the impact of those contributions. At this point, if we weren't able to pay people for their time, it would be hard for people to spend that time on ESLint, which I think is not an ESLint specific problem. It's something that all open source projects seem to get into as they get older. And so this is one of the ways that we're able to keep people active in the project. Some of the things we do is we actually redonate some of that money. So TypeScript ESLint is actually a project that ESLint sponsors because it's so important to the community. We want to make sure that those folks are being paid for the tremendous amount of work that they're putting into that project. So we send a portion of our sponsorships to them each month, as well as with a bunch of other projects that are within the ESLint community that we think are important and want to make sure that they stick around.
I have two way of monetizing, which is one of them is ads. So there is a small banner advertisement on the website that basically helps with the monetization. And also on top of that, there are kind people who are willing to contribute financially or sponsor the projects, which I have to thank them really much, because without them, it would be really hard to focus more time on Daisy UI. Fortunately, GitHub is not available in Turkey, GitHub sponsors, and it's on Open Collective.
Were there any like specific people you met? What about in a conference? Like, was there someone else that you met and then like you had the clout to connect with them, or like with an opportunity, something like that?
Yeah. Experiences a lot of my like closer friends now. I used to follow, listen to their stuff. Like one time, like last year, we all ended up in Florida at the same time somehow. And there was like, we had a single fishing, but we were fishing, boating in the ocean. And we had a boat with like the 3 or 4 creators there that for me were kind of all-time celebrities. And so it was just a cool moment of like, man, just pursuing this independent open source thing landed me on a boat in the ocean with like, some of the coolest people that I can think of.
So yeah, I mean, it's been great. Like I've been able to hop on a conference call with the TypeScript team and sort of talk through how ESLint and TypeScript can work better. I've been able to talk with folks on the React team, especially early on, trying to figure out, can ESLint be the linter for React projects? So it's definitely allowed more access to more companies and getting to learn more about what they're doing internally, what their tooling ecosystem looks like, and how ESLint fits into that. I have been invited to speak at like conferences, invited to write about different things. So it does open doors, but I think the thing that I've enjoyed the most is actually just getting to talk with other open source maintainers and hearing about their experiences, especially when we were first starting to get sponsorships. I spent a lot of time talking with Sean Larkin on WebKit, Henry Zhu on Babel, trying to figure out how they were dealing with sponsorships so that it could inform how we were doing it. And still talk to those folks periodically because we're kind of the triumvirate of the JavaScript tooling ecosystem, ESLint, Webpack, and Babel. So we all kind of deal with the same sort of scaling issues at around the same time. But really, as with anything, I think just getting access to those sort of folks, getting to meet different people who are working on different things has been really fun.
Okay, so second to last question. What are you trying to do going into the future? Keep building what you're working on? Do you have some new ideas you're about to build?
I'm going to build an empire. this tool that I thought was just a few week hack session and thought I would just open source it and that would be that, has become like a 4-year journey, and I feel like is just getting started. And yeah, so for me, it's building the empire. That's what I've sort of discovered is like a superpower that I've uncovered is focusing. It's like, man, if you just focus through all the times you want to get distracted on something else, or you don't believe in your tool, or the cards aren't, like stacked your way, or the deck's not stacked your way, like you just keep focusing and focusing. Eventually you'll outlast so many people and so many other tools, because few tools like really have somebody who's driving it home for a long period of time. So yeah, but that's what I'm doing. Same stuff I've been doing, I'm still doing. Just going to try to bite off more ambitious chunks. Yeah.
So in general, I'm mostly spending my time trying to figure out how ESLint can be useful for the next 10 years. So you can think like JSON, Markdown, CSS, and basically we want it to be a tool that anybody can plug in any language into.
Mm-hmm.
And JavaScript just becomes one of those languages, because a lot of people have created their own linters that end up re-implementing a lot of the ESLint core. And I think there's an opportunity there to just say, okay, there are a bunch of things that are common to all the linters. Let's just build those into one common core and make every language that you want to lint a separate plugin. So that's a pretty long-term plan. It's probably going to take 2 or 3 years to have it fully come to fruition. But I think that is where ESLint really needs to go if it's still going to be around in 10 years.
It needs time, because I need to just explore, and I need to just develop and see what people need, and I need to get feedback, and then I can move forward. I don't want to just move wherever I want. I want to make it more useful for people. So let's see what happens. I'm planning for the next major version of Daisy UI, which is version 4, and it's going to be released soon. I'm working on it. I don't want to spoil everything, but yeah, it's going to be available soon.
If people want to find you, where can they find you?
Twitter is where I hang out. Contacting me directly, you could DM me, and sometimes I look at those, but I'm pretty bad at that. But you could just tweet at me and I'll definitely see your tweet. Yeah, I'm on Twitter.
So my website is humanwhocodes.com. You can pretty much contact me in any way possible through that site, but I am on Twitter. My username is Slicknet, and I'm also on Mastodon. My username is nzakis@fostodon.org. And I am on Blue Sky, but there doesn't seem to be much happening on there. So you can find me, but I'm not on there all that often.
I am mostly active on Twitter, and my username is Sadeghi, which is SAADEGHI, and with the same username on GitHub. Yeah, you can find me. You can ask questions if you have. Yeah, I would be happy to answer. I want to thank everyone that is using Daisy UI, everyone who is reporting issues, reporting bugs, contributing to the repository. It's really helpful. And I want to also thank everyone that create content about Daisy UI, because there are a lot of YouTube videos, there are blog posts. I don't know how to thank these people. I'm really appreciating.